The silence before the storm. The deep space monitoring station at Kepler 7 had been quiet for 3 months. Lieutenant Zara Velnix of the Galactic Council fleet stared at her screens, watching the same empty space she had watched for 2 years. Nothing ever happened here. This was the edge of nowhere, where old ships came to rust and young officers came to be forgotten. Then the alarms started screaming. "What is that?" Zara whispered, her 4 eyes wide as she stared at the readings. The energy signature was massive, bigger than anything in the Council database. It was not just big, it was wrong. The readings made no sense. No ship could produce that much power without tearing itself apart. Admiral Kate Morrison stood on the bridge of the JÖRMUNGANDR, watching the stars through the main viewer. She was a tall woman with gray hair and cold blue eyes. 3 years of planning and building had led to this moment. 3 years since the Zephyrians had murdered her world. "Drop us out of hyperspace," she ordered. Captain Alex Rivera nodded from his position at the helm. "Yes, Admiral. Dropping to normal space in 3, 2, 1. The JÖRMUNGANDR appeared in real space like a nightmare given form. The ship was 3 kilometers long, black as the void between stars. Strange blue lights ran along its hull in patterns that hurt to look at. When it moved, space itself seemed to bend around it. Chief Engineer Lisa Park monitored her instruments from the engine room. The quantum core was running perfectly, just as she had designed it. The technology was beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. It had to be. They were going to war against an empire that controlled 200 worlds, and they had only 1 ship. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Grace Miller from her station. "We are receiving multiple hails from the monitoring station. They want to know who we are." Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Tell them we are humanity. Tell them we remember everything." On the monitoring station, Zara watched her instruments go crazy. The human ship was not just big, it was impossible. Her scanners showed weapon systems that should not exist and armor that seemed to absorb energy instead of reflecting it. When she tried to get a clear reading on the ship's power source, her computer simply displayed error messages. "Send a priority alert to the Council," she told her assistant. "Unknown vessel, possible threat level extreme." But the message never sent. Something about the human ship was interfering with their communications. Not jamming them, just changing them. Every signal they tried to send came back as static, mixed with something that sounded almost like screaming. Morrison walked to the tactical station where Commander Jake Sullivan was studying the enemy positions. Sullivan was a big man with scarred hands and angry eyes. He had lost his wife and children when the Zephyrians glassed the human colonies. Like everyone else on this ship, he had nothing left to lose. "Show me their fleet positions," Morrison said. The main screen changed to show a tactical display of the local sector. Dozens of red dots marked Zephyrian ships and stations. They had been so confident in their victory over humanity that they had barely bothered to guard this region. "They think we are all dead," Sullivan said quietly. "They will be half right," Morrison replied. Dr. Maya Chen looked up from her science station. She was young, barely 30, but her mind was sharp as a blade. She had spent 3 years studying Zephyrian technology, learning their weaknesses, planning their destruction. "Admiral, I am detecting movement in the Zephyrian fleet. 3 ships are changing course to intercept us." Morrison nodded. "Let them come. It is time the galaxy learned what happens when you try to kill humanity." The 3 Zephyrian ships were standard cruisers, each one capable of destroying a small moon. Their captains were confident as they approached the strange black ship. It was alone, outnumbered, and far from any support. This would be easy. Captain Thekmore of the lead ship opened a channel to the human vessel. "Unknown ship, you are in Zephyrian space without permission. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Grace Miller looked at Morrison, waiting for orders. The Admiral shook her head. No response. Let them wonder. The Zephyrian ships moved closer, their weapons charging. They had no idea what they were facing. To them, humans were primitives who had been dealt with 3 years ago. The few survivors were scattered refugees hiding in the dark between stars. They were wrong, Engineer Ben Taylor called from the engine room. Admiral, all systems are ready. The quantum cannon is charged and waiting. Morrison felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. The JÖRMUNGANDR was more than just a ship. It was a weapon built from humanity's pain and anger. Every bolt and wire had been placed by people who had lost everything to the Zephyrian Empire. Every system had been designed with one purpose: revenge. Fire when ready, she said calmly. The universe held its breath. Then the JÖRMUNGANDR spoke, and its voice was destruction. A beam of impossible blue light reached out across space and touched the lead Zephyrian cruiser. The ship did not explode. It simply stopped being. One moment it was there, a kilometer of metal and weapons and living beings. The next moment there was only empty space and a slowly expanding cloud of atoms. The other two ships tried to run, but space was no longer their friend. The human ship moved like liquid shadow, appearing where it should not be, striking from angles that did not exist. The second cruiser lasted long enough to fire a desperate message before it too was unmade. The third ship never had a chance. On the monitoring station, Zara stared at her screens in horror. 3 ships, gone in less than a minute. Her instruments could barely track what had happened. The human vessel had weapons that worked on principles she could not understand. Morrison stood in the silence that followed, watching the empty space where her enemies had been. The first blood had been drawn. The galaxy would learn soon enough that humanity was not dead. They were very much alive, and they were angry. Set course for the Zephyrian border, she ordered. Maximum speed. The JÖRMUNGANDR turned away from the monitoring station and vanished into hyperspace, leaving only silence and terror behind. The war for humanity's revenge had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. When God's Bleed War Prime Thexnor stood in the command center of the Zephyrian fortress world of Kethvar, staring at the report in his clawed hands. 3 ships destroyed by an unknown vessel. His subordinates claimed it was human, but that was impossible. The humans were extinct. He had made sure of that himself 3 years ago. Send the 3rd fleet, he ordered, his voice like grinding stone. 50 ships should be enough to deal with one primitive vessel. Admiral Kethza bowed his massive head. It will be done, War Prime. The fleet will depart within the hour. Thexnor dismissed the admiral with a wave of his hand. Humans were weak, creatures soft and short-lived. Even if some had survived, they could never threaten the mighty Zephyrian Empire. This was probably just a desperate attempt at revenge by the last few refugees. On the JÖRMUNGANDR, Admiral Morrison watched the enemy fleet approach on the main screen. 50 ships, each one larger than the old human battleships. They moved, in perfect formation, confident in their power and numbers. They had no idea what was coming for them. Commander Jake Sullivan studied the tactical display with cold eyes. They are coming fast, Admiral. Standard attack formation. They think this will be easy. Show them how wrong they are, Morrison replied. Dr. Maya Chen worked at her science station, calculating firing solutions and enemy movements. Her computers could process information faster than any Zephyrian mind. Every enemy ship was already targeted, their weaknesses identified, their destruction planned down to the last detail. Enemy fleet will be in weapons range in 5 minutes, she reported. Captain Alex Rivera checked his flight controls one more time. The JÖRMUNGANDR handled differently than any ship he had ever flown. It did not just move through space. It bent space around itself, making the impossible possible. All stations report ready, Admiral, he said. Morrison nodded. Begin the attack. The 3rd fleet of the Zephyrian Empire had conquered worlds and burned civilizations. They had never known defeat. Their ships were massive wedges of metal and firepower, each one crewed by hundreds of trained warriors. They had faced desperate enemies before and crushed them all, but they had never faced humanity's anger made real. The JÖRMUNGANDR moved like a ghost through their formation, appearing and disappearing faster than their sensors could track. The first ship died before it even knew it was under attack. A blue beam of impossible energy touched its hull, and the massive warship simply ceased to exist. Captain Mortek of the battleship Doombringer tried to target the human vessel, but his weapons could not lock on. The ship seemed to be everywhere, and nowhere at once. His gunners fired at empty space while the human vessel appeared behind them, its weapons already charging. "All ships, concentrate fire!" Admiral Kethza shouted over the communication channels. "Bring down that human ship." But the JÖRMUNGANDR was not where their guns pointed. It was above them, below them, beside them, moving through dimensions that Zephyrian science said did not exist. Each time it fired, another ship died, not destroyed, simply erased from reality. Lieutenant Steve Walker monitored the enemy communications from his post. The Zephyrian voices were full of panic now, their perfect formation breaking apart as ships tried to flee from an enemy they could not fight. "They are calling for reinforcements," he reported, "and they are trying to retreat." Morrison's smile was sharp as a blade. "Let some of them run. I want the galaxy to know what happened here." Engineer Ben Taylor watched his instruments with satisfaction. The quantum core was performing perfectly, providing unlimited power for their impossible weapons. The Zephyrians had thought themselves gods of war. Today they would learn that humans were something far more dangerous. The battle was not really a battle. It was an execution. One by one, the Zephyrian ships died. Some tried to fight, firing desperate volleys that passed harmlessly through empty space. Others tried to run, their engines screaming as they pushed toward the edge of the system. It did not matter. The JÖRMUNGANDR found them all. Medical Officer Amy Foster stood ready in sickbay, but no wounded came. The human ship took no damage, suffered no losses. It was like watching a force of nature at work, unstoppable and terrible. Communications Officer Grace Miller listened to the enemy radio chatter as it grew more and more desperate. The Zephyrian language had many words for victory and conquest. It had very few words for the kind of total defeat they were experiencing. "Admiral," she called out, "the enemy flagship is trying to surrender." Morrison considered this for a moment. The Zephyrian Empire had shown no mercy to human colonies, no compassion for human children. But she was not them. She was better. "Accept their surrender," she said. "Take them prisoner." The mighty battleship Heartrender, flagship of the Third Fleet, powered down its weapons and dropped its shields. Admiral Kethza stood on his bridge, his proud head bowed in defeat. In all his years of war, he had never imagined such a thing was possible. Captain Tom Baker led the boarding party that secured the enemy ship. The Zephyrian crew offered no resistance. They had seen their entire fleet destroyed by a single human vessel. Their spirit was broken, their confidence shattered. 17 minutes, Dr. Chen reported, as the last enemy ship was destroyed. That is how long it took to destroy 50 of their best warships. Morrison looked at the debris field that had once been the pride of the Zephyrian fleet. Pieces of metal and crystal floated in the void, all that remained of thousands of enemy. "Warriors, send a message to the Zephyrian High Command," she ordered. "Tell them this was just the beginning. Tell them humanity remembers what they did to our worlds. Tell them we are coming for them all." Engineer Lisa Park called from the engine room. "Power levels holding steady at 97%, Admiral. We barely used any energy at all." Morrison nodded. The JÖRMUNGANDR was designed to fight entire fleets, to face impossible odds and emerge victorious. Today had been just a test of its capabilities. The real war was yet to come. As the human ship turned toward Zephyrian space, the few surviving enemy vessels fled in terror. They carried with them news that would shake the galaxy to its core. Humanity was not dead. Humanity was angry. And humanity had built something that could destroy gods. The age of Zephyrian dominance was ending. The age of human vengeance had begun. The reckoning spreads. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In the halls of the Galactic Council, in the trading posts of the Crystal Syndicate, in the war chambers of the Kragath clans, beings who had never heard of humanity now spoke the name with fear and wonder. The Third Fleet was gone. 50 warships unmade by a single human vessel. Ambassador Carol White sat in her small quarters aboard the diplomatic station at Nexus Prime, watching the news feeds with grim satisfaction. For 3 years, she had begged the galaxy to help the human survivors. For 3 years, she had been ignored, dismissed, told that humanity was too weak to matter. Now her communication panel was full of urgent messages from species who suddenly wanted to talk. "Ambassador White," came the voice of Prime Minister Velkar of the Hegemony Alliance. "We must discuss the human situation immediately. Perhaps we can reach some arrangement." Carol deleted the message without listening to the rest. The time for arrangements had passed. On the JÖRMUNGANDR, Admiral Morrison studied the tactical display showing Zephyrian space. Hundreds of worlds, thousands of ships, millions of soldiers. The Empire was vast and powerful, but it was also afraid. Fear made even strong enemies weak. "Set course for the Helios system," she ordered. "They have a major shipyard there." Captain Alex Rivera nodded and laid in the course. The JÖRMUNGANDR slipped into hyperspace like a shadow, leaving no trace for enemy sensors to follow. In the Zephyrian capital city of Kethmore, Emperor Zeftal called an emergency council meeting. The massive alien ruler sat on his crystal throne, his forearms shaking with rage and fear. The destruction of the Third Fleet was impossible, yet it had happened. "How?" he demanded, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "How did one ship destroy 50 of our best vessels?" War Prime Thexnor stood before his emperor, his head bowed in shame. "We underestimated them, Divine One. The humans have technology. We do not understand." "Technology?" Zeftal's voice rose to a roar. "They are primitives. We destroyed their colonies with ease." "Perhaps," said Science Prime Colvex quietly, "we destroyed their weakness and left only their strength." The Emperor turned his burning gaze on the scientist. "Explain." "The humans who survived were the smartest, the strongest, the most determined. They had 3 years to plan and build while consumed with rage and grief. We may have created the perfect enemy." The JÖRMUNGANDR dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Helios system. The massive shipyard hung in space like a metal flower, its construction bays filled with half-built warships. This was where the Zephyrian Empire built its future. Morrison intended to destroy that future. Commander Jake Sullivan studied the defenses with professional interest. Orbital weapons platforms, patrol ships, fighter squadrons. A fortress that could hold off a fleet, but they had only planned for conventional attacks. "Defense grid is active," reported Dr. Maya Chen. 47 weapons platforms, 12 patrol vessels, and approximately 200 fighters. "More than enough to destroy a normal fleet," Morrison observed. "Fortunately, we are not normal." Captain Tom Baker prepared his boarding teams while Medical Officer Amy Foster set up temporary holding areas for prisoners. The JÖRMUNGANDR was not just a weapon of destruction, it was a tool of liberation. The shipyard held thousands of slave workers from conquered worlds. Lieutenant Steve Walker monitored enemy communications as panic spread through the Zephyrian forces. They had all heard what happened to the Third Fleet. Some ships were already powering down their weapons, their crews unwilling to face the human ghost ship. "Multiple surrender signals, Admiral," he reported. "Accept them all," Morrison replied. "But keep our weapons charged. Trust is earned." The JÖRMUNGANDR moved through the shipyard defenses like smoke through a net. Those few defenders who chose to fight died quickly and quietly. The rest watched in silent terror as the human ship docked with the main construction facility. Engineer Ben Taylor led the technical teams that secured the shipyard's computer systems. The Zephyrians had detailed records of every ship they had built, every world they had conquered, every atrocity they had committed. This information would be useful. "Admiral," called Communications Officer Grace Miller, "we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They want to mediate." Morrison laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Tell them we tried diplomacy 3 years ago. No one wanted to listen. The liberation of the shipyard took 6 hours. Thousands of prisoners were freed, their alien eyes wide with disbelief as human soldiers cut their chains. Many of them had been slaves for so long they had forgotten what freedom felt like. Engineer Lisa Park worked with the freed prisoners to sabotage the Zephyrian shipbuilding capability. They destroyed construction templates, corrupted computer, systems, and planted explosives in key facilities. When they were done, it would take the Empire years to rebuild. As news of the shipyard's fall spread, something unexpected happened. Zephyrian colonies began to surrender without a fight. Governors who had ruled their worlds with iron fists suddenly found their authority crumbling as their subjects refused to die for an empire that could not protect them. On the trading world of Rextar, merchant Prince Velnon received word that the human ship was only 2 days away. He had grown rich selling weapons to the Zephyrian military. Now those same weapons seemed useless against an enemy that could not be touched. "Prepare the treasure ships," he ordered his servants. "We leave for the neutral zones immediately." But it was too late. The JÖRMUNGANDR appeared in orbit like a dark star, its presence alone enough to freeze the blood of every being on the planet. The merchant prince's ships never left the ground. Dr. Chen analyzed the data they had gathered from captured Zephyrian computers. The Empire was larger than they had thought, but also more fragile. It held together through fear and force. Take away the fear of Zephyrian power, and the whole structure would collapse. "Admiral," she reported, "I am detecting mass evacuations from 17 Zephyrian worlds. Their citizens are fleeing rather than face us." Morrison nodded with satisfaction. "Good. Let them run. Let them tell others what they have seen." The psychological warfare was working better than any weapon. The JÖRMUNGANDR had become a legend, a nightmare that haunted Zephyrian dreams. A single ship that could appear anywhere, destroy anything, and vanish like smoke. Emperor Zeftal sat alone in his throne room, staring at reports of rebellion and surrender from across his empire. Worlds that had been loyal for centuries were now declaring independence. His own generals were beginning to question his orders. "Divine One," came the nervous voice of his aide. "The human ship has taken the Helios shipyard. Admiral Kethamor is requesting permission to retreat." Zeftal closed his 4 eyes in defeat. His empire was crumbling and he was powerless to stop it. The humans had found his weakness, his people's faith in Zephyrian invincibility. "Grant the retreat," he said quietly, "and send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them we are willing to negotiate." But the JÖRMUNGANDR was already moving to its next target, carrying with it the promise of justice and the threat of annihilation. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson about the price of trying to exterminate humanity. Some species could be conquered, others could be broken. But humanity could only be made angry, and an angry humanity was a terrible thing to face. When the galaxy kneels, the emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called for the first time in 200 years. Representatives from every major species gathered in the Great Chamber on Nexus Prime, their faces showing fear, confusion, and disbelief. The humans were supposed to be extinct, yet here they were, bringing down the galaxy's second-largest empire with a single ship. Council Speaker Veltar stood at the center podium, his ancient voice shaking as he addressed the assembly. "We face an unprecedented situation. The human vessel JÖRMUNGANDR has destroyed or captured 17 Zephyrian military installations. 34 worlds have surrendered without resistance. The Zephyrian Empire is in complete collapse." In the observation gallery, Ambassador Carol White watched the proceedings with cold satisfaction. These same beings had refused to help when the Zephyrians were committing genocide against human colonies. Now they wanted to act. Representative Kekalon of the Kragath clans slammed his massive fist on his desk. "We must intervene. This human ship threatens the balance of power." "With what?" asked Prime Minister Thalvex of the Crystal Syndicate. "Did you not see the combat footage? They unmade 50 warships in 17 minutes. Our combined fleets would last perhaps an hour." The chamber erupted in angry voices and fearful whispers. The JÖRMUNGANDR had done more than destroy ships. It had shattered the illusion that any of them were safe from a sufficiently motivated enemy. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the JÖRMUNGANDR, watching the blue-green world of Zeftai grow larger on the main screen. The Zephyrian homeworld, heart of an empire that had ruled 200 star systems for 2,000 years. By tomorrow, it would kneel before humanity. "Orbital defenses are powering down," reported Commander Jake Sullivan. "Looks like they got our message." The message had been simple and direct. Surrender unconditionally or watch their homeworld burn. Morrison felt no satisfaction in threatening civilians, but the Zephyrians had shown no mercy to human children. Sometimes fear was the only language that monsters understood. Captain Alex Rivera monitored the flight path as they descended into the planet's atmosphere. Millions of Zephyrian citizens watched from below as the black ship that had destroyed their empire came to claim their world. Dr. Maya Chen studied the energy readings from the planet's surface. "Multiple power signatures going offline, Admiral. Military installations, government buildings, communication arrays. They are shutting down all resistance capability." "Smart of them," Morrison replied. "Signal the surface. We want Emperor Zeftal brought to the capital spaceport in 1 hour. Alone." Emperor Zeftal stood in his private chambers, staring at his reflection in the crystal mirror. Once he had been the most powerful being in the galaxy, ruler of billions of subjects, commander of fleets that could shatter worlds. Now he was a broken old alien, his empire in ruins around him. His aide entered the room with shaking hands. "Divine One, the humans are demanding your presence at the spaceport. They say you have 1 hour." Zeftal nodded slowly. "Prepare my ceremonial robes. If I am to surrender my empire, I will do it with dignity." The JÖRMUNGANDR landed at the main spaceport like a piece of night-given form. The ship was so large it dwarfed the terminal buildings, its dark hull gleaming with strange energies. Thousands of Zephyrian citizens had gathered to watch their emperor meet his conquerors. Morrison walked down the boarding ramp with her senior officers behind her. Captain Tom Baker and his security team formed a protective circle, but the crowd was silent and subdued. These people had seen their mighty fleet destroyed by this single ship. They had no fight left in them. Emperor Zeftal waited at the edge of the landing field, his forearms folded in the traditional gesture of submission. He was smaller than Morrison had expected, aged and worn down by the weight of defeat. "I am Admiral Kate Morrison of the human vessel JÖRMUNGANDR," she announced, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. "I accept the surrender of the Zephyrian Empire." The Emperor bowed his massive head. "I am Zeftal, last Emperor of the Zephyrians. I surrender my crown, my armies, and my worlds to humanity. We have no more strength to resist." Communications Officer Grace Miller activated the recording devices. This moment would be broadcast across the galaxy, showing every species what happened to those who tried to destroy humanity. "Your empire committed genocide against human colonies," Morrison continued. "You murdered billions of innocent people because you thought we were weak. You were wrong." The crowd murmured at her words. Many of them had celebrated when news of the human colony's destruction reached them. Now they faced the consequences of their leaders' actions. Engineer Ben Taylor stepped forward with a data pad containing the terms of surrender. The document was thorough and unforgiving. Complete disarmament, war reparations, territorial concessions, and the trial of war criminals. The Zephyrian Empire would survive, but it would never again threaten another species. Lieutenant Steve Walker monitored communications from across the galaxy as news of the surrender spread. The reaction was immediate and profound. Species that had never acknowledged human existence suddenly wanted to establish diplomatic relations. Old enemies offered alliances. Former friends begged forgiveness. Medical Officer Amy Foster stood ready to treat any injuries, but the surrender proceeded peacefully. The Zephyrian people had no desire to die for an empire that could no longer protect them. "The galaxy is watching," Morrison told the assembled crowd. "Let them see what happens when you try to exterminate humanity. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we never stop coming." Engineer Lisa Park worked with the local technicians to broadcast the surrender ceremony across every communication network in the galaxy. The message was clear. Humanity had returned to the stars, and they were not the weak primitives that others had believed them to be. In the Galactic Council chambers, the representatives watched the surrender in stunned silence. The mighty Zephyrian Empire, which had conquered worlds and enslaved species, had fallen to a single human ship. The implications were staggering. "Motion to intervene withdrawn," muttered Representative Keklon, his warrior pride crushed by the reality of human power. Council Speaker Veltar called for order, but the chamber remained in chaos. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. What did humanity want? Would they be satisfied with the Zephyrian Empire, or would they continue their campaign of conquest? Admiral Morrison provided the answer as she stood before the cameras on Zeftai. "Humanity seeks justice, not conquest. We want reparations for our murdered colonies, recognition of our territorial claims, and assurance that genocide will never again be committed against human beings. Give us this, and we will live in peace. Deny us, and face the consequences." Captain Rivera prepared the ship for departure as the formal documents were signed. The JÖRMUNGANDR had accomplished its mission. The galaxy now knew that humanity could not be destroyed, only angered. And an angry humanity was something no species wanted to face. As the great ship lifted off from the Zephyrian homeworld, Emperor Zeftal watched from his palace window. His empire was gone, his people conquered, his legacy destroyed. But perhaps, he thought, this was justice. They had tried to play God with an entire species. Now they faced the judgment of those they had wronged. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over. The age of human reckoning had begun. And across the galaxy, every species with blood on their hands wondered if they would be next. The New Order 6 months had passed since the fall of the Zephyrian Empire, and the galaxy had learned to speak a new language. The language of respect for humanity. Ambassador Carol White walked through the halls of the new human embassy on Nexus Prime, past offices filled with diplomats from species that had never acknowledged human existence before the JÖRMUNGANDR's appearance. The transformation was remarkable. Where once she had been ignored and dismissed, now she was invited to every major council session. Where once humanity had been seen as extinct primitives, now they were recognized as a major galactic power. Admiral Morrison stood in the observation lounge of the JÖRMUNGANDR, looking down at the green world of New Geneva. It had once been a Zephyrian slave world called Kethvar, home to millions of beings forced to work in crystal mines. Now it was the capital of the human colonial zone, its people free and its future bright. "Admiral," called Captain Alex Rivera from the bridge, "we have another diplomatic convoy requesting permission to dock. That makes 12 today." Morrison smiled. Every species in the galaxy wanted to establish relations with humanity now. Trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, cultural exchanges. All the things they had refused 3 years ago were now being offered freely. "Grant permission," she replied, "but maintain standard security protocols." Administrator Ann Cooper worked from her office in New Geneva's capital city, managing the transition of 34 former Zephyrian worlds to human control. It was delicate work, balancing justice with mercy, ensuring that the sins of the Empire did not fall on innocent civilians. "The Altarian delegation is here about the mining rights," her assistant informed her. "They are offering very generous terms." Anne nodded. The Altarians had been allies of the Zephyrians during the genocide. Now they wanted to make amends by offering favorable trade deals. Money could not bring back the dead, but it could help build a better future for those who survived. Commander Jake Sullivan reviewed the security reports from across human space. There had been a few attempted terrorist attacks by Zephyrian extremists, but nothing the security forces could not handle. Most former Imperial citizens were adapting well to life under human rule. "Crime rates are down 40%, he reported to Morrison during their weekly briefing. "Turns out people behave better when they know justice will be swift and fair." Dr. Maya Chen divided her time between scientific research and education. The JÖRMUNGANDR's impossible technology had revolutionized galactic understanding of physics and engineering. Universities across known space were begging for human professors and researchers. "The Quantum Institute on Nexus Prime wants to offer you the position of Chief Science Officer," she told Morrison. "Full funding for any research project you want." Morrison shook her head. "My place is here, watching over humanity's interests. But you should consider it, Maya. The galaxy needs to understand what we are capable of. The transformation of human space was remarkable. Former slave worlds became centers of learning and culture. Oppressed populations found voice and freedom under human protection. The iron fist of the Zephyrian Empire was replaced by the fair hand of human justice. Captain Tom Baker led regular patrols through the colonial zone, ensuring that the peace was maintained. His ships carried former enemies alongside human crews, building bonds of trust and cooperation that would last for generations. Patrol 7 reporting, came his voice over the communication system. All sectors clear. The Venusian refugees have successfully settled on Haven Colony. Medical officer Amy Foster had established hospitals and medical schools throughout human space. The advanced medical technology that had once been reserved for Zephyrian elites was now available to all beings regardless of species or social status. "We saved 3,000 lives this month alone," she reported. "The new bioregeneration technology is working better than we hoped." Engineer Ben Taylor worked with teams of alien scientists to understand and improve upon human technology. The quantum drives that powered the JÖRMUNGANDR were being adapted for peaceful purposes: faster-than-light communication, unlimited clean energy, and transportation systems that could move entire populations if needed. Communications Officer Grace Miller monitored the galactic news networks, watching as humanity's reputation continued to grow. They were no longer seen as vengeful conquerors, but as liberators and protectors of the weak. "The Hegemony Alliance is requesting our assistance with a pirate problem," she reported. "They are offering significant compensation for our help." Lieutenant Steve Walker analyzed intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Other empires were taking note of what had happened to the Zephyrians. Old grievances were being settled peacefully, minority rights were being respected, and aggressive expansion had slowed dramatically. "Fear is a teacher," Morrison observed, as she read his reports. "The galaxy is learning that there are consequences for atrocities." Engineer Lisa Park had returned to her first love, building things instead of destroying them. Her new designs were focused on exploration and colonization, preparing humanity for peaceful expansion into the unknown regions beyond charted space. "The deep space sensors are detecting habitable worlds in the Andromeda sector," she reported. "We could have colonies there within 5 years." The Galactic Council had formally recognized human territorial claims and granted humanity a permanent seat on the ruling board. Ambassador White now sat at the same table as beings who had once refused to acknowledge her species' existence. "The motion to establish galactic genocide prevention protocols has passed unanimously," she reported during her weekly call with Morrison. "No species will ever again face what happened to our colonies." Emperor Zeftal, now living in comfortable exile on a peaceful agricultural world, spent his days writing memoirs about the fall of his empire. His book, titled The Price of Arrogance, was becoming required reading in diplomatic schools across the galaxy. "We thought we were gods," he wrote. "We learned we were merely bullies, and bullies, when faced with true strength, always fall." The JÖRMUNGANDR itself had become a symbol of hope to the oppressed and fear to the oppressors. Its patrol routes through human space were planned carefully to remind everyone that humanity's protection was real and their justice was absolute. Morrison often stood in the ship's memorial chamber, looking at the wall containing the names of every human who had died in the Zephyrian genocide. 3 billion names carved in black stone lit by eternal flames. "We kept our promise," she whispered to the names. "We made them pay. We made them all pay." The galaxy had learned many lessons from humanity's return. They learned that some species could not be destroyed, only made angry. They learned that justice delayed was not justice denied. They learned that the weak, when given time and motivation, could become the strong. Most importantly, they learned to fear the quiet ones. The species that built in silence, planned in secret, and struck without warning. Humanity had shown them all what happened when you tried to exterminate the children of Earth. The children of Earth remembered everything, and they never forgave. As the JÖRMUNGANDR continued its eternal patrol of human space, its very presence served as a reminder to the galaxy. Some sleeping giants, once awakened, could never be put back to sleep. Some wounds, once inflicted, could never truly heal. Some enemies once made lasted forever. The galaxy was at peace now, but it was a peace built on understanding and fear. Understanding that humanity would protect the innocent and punish the guilty, fear that they had the power to do both. In the depths of space, new ships were being built, human ships carrying human crews to human colonies among the stars. The species that had once been dismissed as primitives now led the galaxy into a new age of justice and prosperity. The age of human dominance had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.